I signed up to volunteer at the shelter because my therapist said I needed more connection in my life. I don't think she meant scooping dog shit and wiping down metal cages, but it was better than spending another weekend scrolling Instagram and pretending I was fine. I needed something different, something real. I didn't expect to run into Nate. It had been almost 3 years since we last saw each other. Technically, it wasn't even a breakup. Just one of those we should stop doing this conversations that never felt like closure. We were friends who blurred the lines too many times until the lines disappeared completely. Then he moved to Chicago, and I deleted his number out of spite, even though I still remembered it. And now here he was, crouched beside a black lab mix with a busted paw, his dark hair tucked under a beanie, looking way too good for someone in a tattered volunteer hoodie. "Ben?" he said, like it was just a surprise. Not a gut punch. I froze halfway through tying on my apron. "Hey." He stood up slowly, brushing off his jeans. "Wow. Didn't think I'd ever see you here." I gave a small shrug. Guess I needed a new hobby. There was an awkward pause. Not hostile, just layered. Heavy with everything we didn't say back then and everything we definitely weren't saying now. "Still rescuing strays?" I asked, nodding toward the dog. Nate grinned, and it hit me in the chest. That stupid grin. He used to flash it right after doing something reckless, like sneaking into my bed after midnight or kissing me outside a movie theater, even though we said we'd keep it casual. "Always," he said. "They let me handle the tougher cases now. This one got hit by a car, but she's a fighter." I smiled politely, keeping my eyes on the dog instead of his face. "She looks like she's in good hands." "Thanks." Another beat of silence. A woman in a red vest called out from across the room. "Nate, you're on the socialization run today. Take someone with you." Before I could even move, she pointed at me. "New guy, Ben, right? Go with him. We're pairing off today." Of course we were. I turned back to Nate. He raised an eyebrow. "Guess it's you and me." I could have said no, I should have, but instead I just nodded and followed him toward the back kennels. The hallway smelled like disinfectant and wet fur. A line of barking dogs echoed through the concrete, and I kept my focus on the task, not the man walking 2 steps ahead of me. "So how long have you been back?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. 8 months. "Damn, thought you were still in New York." "I was. Didn't work out." He nodded, like he got it. "Same with Chicago." We reached the last kennel in the row. Inside was a mutt that looked like a German shepherd, mixed with something smaller and meaner. He was pacing, tail wagging like a metronome on cocaine. "This is Milo," Nate said. "He needs exposure time, but he's leash reactive. We'll walk him around the side path, away from traffic." I clipped a leash to Milo's collar while Nate opened the gate. As soon as we stepped outside, the cold bit through my jacket, and Milo lurched forward like he had somewhere to be. The trail behind the shelter was quiet, just trees, gravel, and the occasional angry squirrel. We walked in silence for a bit, letting Milo burn energy while I tried not to notice how Nate's hoodie pulled across his shoulders when he moved. So, Nate finally said, voice low, "This is awkward, right?" I huffed a laugh. "A little." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I didn't expect you to show up here. Trust me, I wasn't planning on running into you either. Guess we're both bad at disappearing." I slowed my pace, letting Milo sniff at a patch of frozen grass. "Why'd you leave so fast back then? You just texted me that it was better if we didn't talk anymore." Nate looked away. "Because I was falling for you, and I didn't know if you felt the same." My stomach dropped. "You could have asked." I was scared. I stared at him, half from shock, half from the weight of old memories bubbling up. Nights on his couch, my head in his lap, the way he used to grab my hand under the table when no one was looking. "I wasn't ready to lose you," he added quietly. "You still did," I said. He nodded, like he knew that already. Milo tugged on the leash, reminding us both that time hadn't stopped. "We should head back," I said. "Yeah." We turned around. walking side by side but not touching. Not yet, but something had shifted. Not just the air or the awkwardness, but the thread between us, the one we pretended to cut years ago. It was still there, maybe frayed, but intact. And I had no idea what to do with that. The next week, I went back. I told myself it was about the dogs, about routine, about giving back, or whatever moral justification I needed to slap on it. But if I was being honest with myself, which I rarely was lately, I wanted to see Nate again. And I did. He was already there when I arrived, kneeling next to a golden retriever puppy who looked like he'd swallowed a sock. I watched him for a moment from the entrance, his head tilted slightly, whispering something to the dog like they were in on a secret together. It was ridiculous how quickly my chest tightened. Like my body remembered him before my brain could catch up. He looked up and caught me staring. His grin was slower this time, almost shy. "Hey," he said, standing. "Hey." I tried to sound casual, like this wasn't the highlight of my week. "You're back." I figured the dogs deserved a second date. He laughed, that low chuckle that used to come out when we'd lie on the floor eating takeout and watching terrible movies. "Well, Milo missed you. He's been acting like an idiot all week." "I think that's just who he is." Nate smiled. "You're probably right." Before we could talk more, a staff member handed us our clipboards and assigned us to the back run again. Same dogs, same trail. I didn't even try to pretend I wasn't happy about it. As we walked, the conversation came easier. There was still some old tension, sure, but it was different now. Quieter, familiar. "So," Nate said as we rounded the first bend, "do you still have that hideous green couch?" I smirked. First of all, it was teal. And second, no, it died a noble death during my last move. Shame, that thing was weirdly comfortable. I think it just absorbed our asses and gave up. He barked out a laugh, head tilting back. God, I'd forgotten how much I missed that sound. Not just his laugh, but the way he'd laugh at my jokes. Like he really saw me. We kept walking, letting Milo sniff every patch of dirt like it was his full-time job. The sky was overcast, the kind of gray that made the whole world feel softer somehow. "So you said Chicago didn't work out?" I asked, careful. Nate nodded. "Yeah. Thought a change would help. Different job, new city, clean slate. But I still felt like I was running. From myself, I guess." I looked at him. "You weren't the only one." He glanced over. "Yeah?" I nodded. "New York, wasn't it? I thought if I could just bury myself in work and noise and strangers, I'd stop thinking about things. About people." Nate looked at me for a long beat. "Did it work?" "No," I said honestly. "Not really." He was quiet for a while. Milo pulled ahead, the leash tugging gently between us. "I used to think about texting you," he said eventually. Even had the message typed out a few times, but I couldn't hit send. "Why not?" He chewed the inside of his cheek, a nervous habit I remembered. "Because I didn't want to be that guy. The one who shows up months later with nothing but regret and hope." I swallowed. "You were already that guy. The only difference now is you're here." That seemed to hit him. His expression shifted, like something softened behind his eyes. "I'm glad I am," he said. We reached the clearing at the end of the trail, the spot where the trees opened up and the shelter came into view again, gray against the skyline. "I don't know what this is," I admitted, voice quieter. "Us running into each other again. Fate, coincidence, punishment. Redemption?" he offered. I looked at him. He shrugged. "Maybe it's a second chance. Maybe it's nothing. But I want to find out." We stopped walking. Milo sat obediently between us, tongue out, tail wagging, like he knew something we didn't. I studied Nate's face. There were little things I hadn't noticed before. New creases near his eyes. A scar on his chin I didn't remember. But the way he looked at me, that was the same. That open, careful kind of stare, like he was afraid I'd disappear if he blinked. "I don't know if I'm ready," I said. "I'm not asking you to be," he replied. "Just asking you to walk the trail with me. We both looked down at Milo, who barked once, as if to say, "Hurry up, gay idiots." I smiled. Okay. We turned back toward the shelter. Not touching, not talking, just walking. But this time, it felt like we weren't walking alone. We didn't make any declarations, no sweeping gestures. Just kept showing up. Every Saturday, like clockwork. We'd walk dogs, scrub kennels, eat stale donuts in the break room, and talk, really talk, for the first time in years. It started feeling weirdly natural again, like the part of us that had unraveled before was slowly stitching itself back together, thread by thread. Still, I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I mean, this was Nate, the guy who vanished without warning, the guy who once kissed me in a bar bathroom and then ghosted me a week later, like it never happened. But he was different now, or maybe I was. Either way, things were changing. It was the third Saturday in a row when something shifted. We'd just finished walking Milo and Hazel, this little brown mutt with way too much energy for her tiny legs. Nate had insisted we stop at this food truck down the street that made the best breakfast burritos in the city. We sat on the curb outside the shelter, burritos in hand, backs against the brick wall, the sun finally breaking through the clouds. "You still listen to that sad indie band?" he asked, mouth full of egg and salsa. I gave him a look. "You're gonna have to be way more specific." "You know, the one with the lead singer who sounds like he's always on the verge of tears?" I laughed. "Oh, you mean the band? Yeah, of course." He smiled, chewing thoughtfully. "Figures. Some things don't change. Not everything's supposed to." We fell into a quiet moment. Not awkward, just full. Like neither of us wanted to break it. Then Nate said, "You want to get a drink sometime?" I blinked. He cleared his throat. Like, "Not here. Not with dogs barking in the background. Just us." I stared at him, caught off guard by how nervous he looked. Nate was never nervous. Not back then. But he was now, and it made me pause. "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said slowly. He nodded, eyes on the pavement. "Fair. It's not a no." He looked at me hopeful. "I just need a little time." I added, "I get it." He offered a small smile. "I can wait." It was such a simple thing to say. No pressure, no begging, just patience, the kind I didn't expect from him. I looked at him for a long second. Okay. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. About him, the way he looked at me, the way I felt when we were just walking the dogs, talking about nothing, but somehow it meant everything. There was something terrifying about how easy it would be to fall back into it, into us. But it was also tempting in a way I hadn't felt in a long time. A few days later, he texted me, "Nate, Hazel got adopted today." I miss her already. Also, still thinking about that drink. I stared at the message for way too long before replying. Me, "Congrats to Hazel. Also, Friday?" Nate, "Yeah, Friday. Pick the place. I'll be there." I picked this small bar tucked away in the lower hills. Dim lighting, no TVs, a decent cocktail list, and a jukebox that only played late 2000s indie rock. Felt safe. Familiar. The kind of place where no one really cared who was sitting across from you. Nate showed up 5 minutes early. I saw him through the window, standing on the sidewalk, hesitating before he came in. That little pause said more than a dozen apologies ever could. When he finally stepped through the door, his eyes landed on me instantly. He smiled. It wasn't big or showy, just soft, steady. "Hey," he said, sliding into the booth. "You made it. Wouldn't miss it." We ordered drinks. Whiskey for me, gin and tonic for him. Old habits. The conversation started light. Work stuff, shelter updates. Milo had chewed through another leash. Hazel's new owners had sent in a photo of her sleeping on a velvet couch like royalty. We laughed more than I expected. But eventually, the space between us tightened. That kind of magnetic quiet that only builds when there's something unsaid sitting in the middle of the table. Nate broke it. "I never stopped thinking about you," he said. "Even when I was trying not to." I swallowed. My fingers tapped lightly on my glass. "Then why didn't you reach out?" "I didn't think I deserved to." I looked up, met his eyes. You didn't. He flinched but nodded. I know. A moment passed. I was angry, I said, and hurt, and confused. I kept going over everything we did, everything we said, trying to find the moment it all went wrong. It wasn't you, he said quickly. I sighed. I know, but that doesn't make it easier. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. I was scared. I kept telling myself that if I let it go, if I left without explanation, you'd move on faster, that I was doing you a favor. You weren't. He nodded, eyes flicking down to his hands. Yeah, I see that now. For a while, neither of us said anything. The bar was quiet, just the soft hum of a guitar coming from the jukebox and the clink of glasses at the far end of the counter. I don't want to pretend it didn't happen, I said finally, but I also don't want to keep replaying it, not if we're going to try again. You want to try again? I didn't answer right away. I looked at him, really looked. His jaw was tense, like he was bracing for disappointment, but his eyes were wide, searching, hopeful in a way that hit me in the gut. I think I do, I said, but it has to be different this time. Real. He nodded, almost too fast. It will be. You don't even know what I mean. I know that I want you, and I want to do it right. That was the thing about Nate. When he looked at you like that, like you were the only person in the room, it was hard to remember anything else. We paid the check and walked out together, into the cool night air. The city was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels temporary, like the world is holding its breath. Outside, we stood there for a beat, not quite ready to say goodbye. Do you want to come over? I asked, surprising myself. Nate looked at me, eyes narrowing just a little. Are you sure? I nodded. He didn't say anything, just stepped closer and gently reached for my hand. The walk to my apartment was silent. But it wasn't empty. We weren't rushing this time. We were just beginning again. The door clicked shut behind us with a quiet finality. Nate stood in the entryway like he wasn't sure if he should take off his shoes or bolt. I kicked mine off and tossed my keys into the bowl by the door, trying to act normal even though my pulse was going crazy. This place hasn't changed much, he said, stepping further inside. I glanced around. My apartment was small, 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, cleanish. Books stacked on every surface, a throw blanket hanging off the couch, the scent of sandalwood from a candle I hadn't lit in weeks. It felt intimate now, suddenly. You remembered what it looked like? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. He turned to me. Yeah, I remember a lot. His eyes lingered on me for a second too long, and suddenly the room felt smaller. I cleared my throat and gestured to the kitchen. You want something? I've got, like, beer, ginger ale, and almond milk. He chuckled. Beer's fine. I grabbed 2 from the fridge and handed him 1. Our fingers touched briefly, and it sent a ripple up my spine. I watched him twist off the cap and take a sip, jaw moving slow, deliberate. Everything about him felt more grounded than I remembered, less reckless. But the tension was still there, buzzing beneath the surface, waiting. We sat on opposite ends of the couch at first, like we were pretending there wasn't a history between us, like we weren't both remembering exactly how this same room used to look at 2 a.m. with our legs tangled under a blanket. I thought about this, Nate said quietly. Being here again. I turned toward him. You mean you pictured us sitting on this couch drinking beers and making polite conversation? He smiled. Something like that. Though I don't remember things being this polite before. We both laughed, and it broke something open. The air eased. Do you remember the time you spilled ramen on my rug and tried to blame it on my neighbor's cat? He laughed. You never proved it wasn't the cat. You were eating on the floor with chopsticks, Nate. There was no cat. He shrugged, smile soft. Still a better story than me being a klutz. For a while, we just talked. Like we used to. It was easy in that disarming, dangerous way. Stories, little moments, all the stuff we never got to say after he left. Somewhere in the middle of a conversation about the best gas station snacks, his knee touched mine. Neither of us moved. His hand rested on his thigh, fingers twitching like he was working up the nerve to do something. So I did it for him. I reached out, laid my hand gently on his, and waited. He looked at me, not surprised, not smug, just quiet, steady. His fingers turned over, lacing between mine. "I miss this," he said. "Me too." Silence again. But it wasn't empty. It was the kind that builds, slow and heavy, like a storm creeping over the hills. Nate leaned in slightly, just enough to make it clear this wasn't a mistake or an accident. I closed the gap. The kiss wasn't urgent. It wasn't even dramatic. Just soft, familiar. His lips were warm, steady, like he wanted me to feel that he meant it this time. And I did. His hand slid to the back of my neck, holding me there like he was afraid I'd pull away. I didn't. The kiss deepened, but we didn't rush it. We didn't need to. There was too much between us for that. All the missed chances, the things left unsaid, the history stretching between our bodies. When we finally pulled apart, we just sat there, foreheads touching, our breaths syncing up. "I don't want this to be a one-time thing," he whispered. "Then don't make it one," I whispered back. The next morning, everything was quiet. Not the awkward kind of quiet, the kind where you're both pretending something didn't happen, but the soft, easy quiet of two people who'd shared something honest and weren't trying to escape it. Nate had fallen asleep next to me on the couch, fully clothed, blanket tossed over us, my head on his shoulder. At some point during the night, I'd turned toward him, and now our legs were tangled, and his hand was resting lightly on my knee. His eyes opened before I even moved. "Hey," he said, voice rough from sleep. "Hey." For a moment, we just looked at each other. I waited for the shift, the panic, the regret, the weird tension that used to settle in after intimacy with him. But it didn't come. He just smiled, small and warm. "You always wake up this early?" he asked. "Only when someone's cutting off circulation to my foot." He looked down. "Oh, sorry." "Don't be. It was a good kind of pain." He chuckled and stretched, groaning slightly. His shirt rode up just enough to expose that strip of skin I used to know by heart. I caught myself staring, then looked away quickly. "You hungry?" I asked, standing and stretching out my back. "If you make coffee, I'll worship you forever. Don't promise things you can't keep." I headed to the kitchen and heard him laughing behind me. I poured 2 mugs, dropped in some sugar like I remembered he liked, and when I turned around, he was leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, still barefoot and sleepy. "You still do that thing," he said. "What thing?" "Remember stuff no one else would." I handed him the mug. "Guess I never really forgot you." His eyes lingered on mine. "I didn't want you to." We ate breakfast like it was normal. Toast, eggs, music playing low in the background. Nate danced a little while waiting for the bread to brown, and I laughed like an idiot because he still had no rhythm. It felt shockingly domestic. But then reality crept in. We couldn't live in this pocket forever. Later, as he laced up his boots and grabbed his keys, he looked at me with that same softness I was starting to realize hadn't gone anywhere. It had just been buried. "So what happens now?" he asked. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "What do you want to happen?" "I want to keep seeing you." "That it?" He smiled. "I want to keep kissing you, walking dogs with you, watching you pretend you don't like Milo, even though he's your favorite." I scoffed. "He's objectively the worst. And yet, you always give him the extra treats." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't help the grin. "You really want to do this?" "I do. But only if you do too." I took a breath. It still scared me, a little. But I nodded. "Then let's do it." Nate leaned in, kissed me once, gentle, quick, grounding, and then pulled back just enough to whisper, "Friday night again?" "Friday night," I confirmed. As he walked out the door, I realized my chest didn't feel tight anymore. There was no heaviness, just this quiet, persistent hope. We didn't call it dating at first. It was grabbing food, or volunteer stuff, or hanging out, but it felt different, clearer. We were finally learning how to be in each other's lives on purpose, not just by accident or inertia. And yeah, there were moments I still braced for him to disappear. Some leftover reflex from before, but he didn't. He stayed. On Fridays, we'd try new restaurants or sit on my fire escape with takeout. Saturdays were still for the shelter. Nate always picked the most chaotic dog of the week, and I always ended up with something small and jumpy that would somehow fall asleep in my lap. And Sundays, well, Sundays became our favorite. Lazy mornings, slow coffee, long walks, sometimes in total silence. One night, we were at my place watching this dumb reality show about couples building houses together. Nate was stretched out on my couch, head in my lap, laughing at something on screen. I was absently playing with his hair when he went quiet. "What?" I asked. He tilted his head back just enough to look up at me. "You ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't left?" I hesitated. "Sometimes. Would we have made it?" I exhaled slowly. "Honestly, probably not. You weren't ready." "I wasn't either. Not really." He nodded. "Yeah, but I think about it sometimes, about how close we were to getting it right." "Well," he said, a little smile creeping in, "maybe we needed to get it wrong first." I smiled back. Maybe. That was the thing about Nate. He wasn't perfect. Still left socks in weird places, still got too competitive playing Mario Kart, still made impulsive decisions that made me roll my eyes, but he was trying. And more than that, he saw me now. Not just the guy he used to hook up with, not just the convenient friend, but the whole me. One night, we walked Milo. Yes, I finally admitted I liked him, up through the trails near the edge of the city. It was just us, the skyline behind us, the air sharp with the kind of cold that made you feel alive. At the overlook, Nate pulled me in close and rested his chin on my shoulder. "I love you," he said, like it wasn't even a question. I turned slowly to face him. "Say that again." "I love you," he repeated, more certain this time. And even though my heart had been ready for weeks, hearing it out loud still made it stutter. "I love you too," I said. He kissed me like he'd been waiting to hear that forever. The first time Nate introduced me to his mom, she hugged me before I even got a word out. "Oh, you're Ben," she said, like my name had been waiting in her mouth for months. We were standing in her kitchen while she stirred something in a slow cooker, and Nate tried not to look like he was sweating through his shirt. Later that night, after she went to bed and we were lying on the pull-out couch in the guest room, Nate whispered, "She's been asking about you since Chicago." I blinked at the ceiling. "You talked about me?" "Too much, apparently." "She thought I made you up." I smiled into the dark. "Guess I'm real now." He rolled onto his side, hand resting over my chest. "Yeah, very real." We fell asleep like that. His fingers tangled with mine, the quiet hum of suburban sprinklers outside the window. Life didn't shift overnight. There were still rough weeks. Work stress. Family stuff. A fight about dishes that turned into a deeper fight about space and expectations. But the difference was, this time, we stayed. We didn't shut down. We didn't vanish. One Saturday, maybe 6 months after we ran into each other at the shelter, we got paired up again on kennel duty. We'd stopped pretending it was weird by then. Everyone at the shelter knew we were together. No one asked questions, though one of the older volunteers kept winking at us every time we showed up with matching thermoses. We were walking a new dog, some shy terrier mix that refused to make eye contact with either of us. When Nate suddenly said, "Hey," I glanced over. He was biting the inside of his cheek, a nervous tick I hadn't seen in a while. I signed us up to foster." I blinked. "Foster what?" He gestured at the dog between us. "Her. Molly. They're short on space. Just temporary." I stared at him. "She won't pee on the rug," he added quickly. "Probably." I laughed. "You didn't even ask me." He smiled. "Yeah, but I figured you'd say yes." I looked down at Molly, who was currently sniffing a leaf like it held the secrets of the universe. Then I looked at Nate. This guy, the one who'd once ghosted me into oblivion, was now inviting me to co-parent a trauma-hardened rescue terrier. And somehow, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. "Yeah," I said. "Let's do it." 3 weeks later, Molly had claimed the middle cushion on the couch and growled at anyone who tried to sit there. Nate pretended to be annoyed, but I caught him hand-feeding her deli meat more than once. One night after we put Molly to bed, yes, she had a bedtime, I found Nate sitting on the couch, flipping through his phone. "What are you doing?" I asked. He looked up, looking at 2-bedroom places. I raised an eyebrow. He shrugged. "You're always here. I'm always here. I figured maybe we should be here, together." It wasn't some big romantic speech. No kneeling, no flowers, just a quiet offer. A choice. I walked over, took the phone from his hand, and sat down beside him. "Show me the listings." Sometimes I still think about that first day. Standing in the shelter hallway, clipboard in hand, stunned speechless by the sight of someone I never thought I'd see again. I had no idea then that it was the beginning of everything. That a second chance could feel so simple. That the guy who once walked away would become the man I woke up next to, who'd leave the coffee pot on for me every morning, who'd remember my order without asking, who'd fall asleep with his hand still wrapped around mine. I volunteered at a shelter, thinking I'd just walk a few dogs. Instead, I found the one person I hadn't stopped hoping for.